Welcome everyone to this amazing panel with amazing writers. Today we're going to talk about a woman's publishing journey. That's the title of this panel. And I'd like to make the introductions. First, we have Deepti Menon, Karen Osman, and Lakshana Palat. Deepti Menon has always loved the written word. She began to write at the age of 10 and was lucky enough to have traveled around the country as an army kid. Her experiences during these years helped hone her interest and her flair for writing. Her first book, Arms and the Woman, published in 2012, and takes a lighthearted look at the life of an army wife. 2013 and 2014 were lucky for her, as many of her short stories were chosen for myriad anthologies. She also has a book of poems titled Deepardhana of Poems. I hope I've pronounced it correctly. Lovingly compiled by her mother herself, a talented writer, and Shadow in the Mirror, a psychological thriller published by Readomania in 2016. Her latest offerings are an ebook of thriller short stories titled Where Shadows Follow, tales that twist and turn, and tales from the
Panchatantra.
There you go. A set of 4 ebooks, all by Readomania. She is currently working on stories based on 10 Shakespearean plays, which she hopes will pique the curiosity of young readers. Writing has been an endless journey with its twists and turns, often leading Deepti on to the myriad mysteries of life, love, and relationships. The thrill of seeing her name in print has only intensified over the years. She believes that Mark Twain had the right idea when he said, "The difference between the right word and the almost right word is the difference between lightning and a lightning bug." There has never been a dull moment, never time to regret, according to her, as life is truly worth living. So welcome, Deepti.
Thank you.
Karen Osman is an award-winning writer and best-selling author. Following her win at the Emirates Airline Festival of Literature Monte Grappa Novel Writing Award 2016 with her crime thriller novel, The Good Mother, renowned literary agent Luigi Bonomo of LBA Books secured a 3-book deal with the UK-based publishing house Head of Zeus. Since then, The Good Mother, which was published in October 2017, and her second novel, The Home, published in 2018, were both number 1 bestsellers. Her third book, A Perfect Lie, was published in August 2019, and she's currently working on her 4th novel. In July 2020, Karen launched a signature online writing course, Kickstart Your Book with Karen, designed for budding authors to help write their books. So welcome, Karen.
Thank you.
An aspiring author, journalist, and a history graduate, Lakshana Palat has written stories for 3 anthologies, When They Spoke, Mocktails, and Readomania's Book of Romance. In 2018, she published her first book, The Final Word. Welcome, Lakshana.
Thank you. Thank you so much. An honor to be here.
So Lakshana, putting the pressure on you.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'd like to start this conversation about your journey, how it all began.
Well, I think I started writing at the age of 5. I used to write for my sister's birthday, stories for her every year. And I used to write these little short stories. And I think the idea of becoming a writer took hold when I was around 8. I mean, properly dreaming of becoming an author took shape when I was around 9 years old, because in school we had these writing workshops, and I'm so grateful to my teachers, where you had to write and they would teach us all the what went into a book. You have the copyright, dedication, and illustration. So it was fun making our own book, and I really thought, oh my God, I'm getting published. It was a little heartbreaking to realize I wasn't at that age, but still. So yeah, and then I continued writing. Every year I would write for my sister. And I tried fantasy. I tried, for years I wrote fantasy. I made an entire universe of my own because it was just so much fun. I mean, and writing was my catharsis. It has always been very, very cathartic for me. and I tried in detective fiction. I tried all sorts of things, but I think I found my comfort in my teenage years in fantasy. Probably thanks to my influence of Harry at that age of Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings and Narnia. And then after that, I think came to these anecdotal stories of real life real life troubles. And so for the past few years I've been experimenting a lot with that. So and in 2018 I mean in 2018 I published my first book, and that was a surreal experience of seeing my name, like, oh my god, I'm almost one step towards being an author. And but I never forget that feeling of being published in the anthology when I saw my name in print. And that was one of the best feelings, and I said, I want to do this, I want to keep writing. It's healing for me, it's my life. And I get a lot of what I don't say in person, I put it out in writing, and the little experiences, everything that I go through in life or what I see with people, and I put in my stories. So yeah.
Thank you for that, Lakshana. Karen, I'd like to go over to you and ask you about your journey.
Yeah, well, like Lakshana and probably Deepti as well, I started writing when I was a very young child, and it was just something I did. And it was very instinctive, very natural to just write and make stories. I didn't really think too much of it. I studied linguistics and English language at university, and from there it was really a natural progression into journalism, copywriting, content writing. I was a travel writer, so I was always writing through most of my career, but it was only when I won the Festival of Literature Awards and got an agent that I became a novelist. So I became a novelist, I suppose, relatively late, almost 40 actually. And so when I got my agent in the UK, that was when things really changed for me. So I was very, very lucky actually to win that competition, because it's very hard to go the route of traditional publishing in the UK through an agent, through a publishing house. So that competition was really life-changing. And from there, he secured me a 3-book deal. And since then, 2016, I've been writing novels ever since. So I still actually run my content writing business here in Dubai as well. So I'm pretty much writing, 24/7, I would say. But novels take up the main bulk of the work.
Yes, and we worked together for Travel Inc. I worked for you, actually. So, Deepti, I'd like you to share your thoughts about your journey.
So I started writing at the age of 10. I wrote my first piece of poetry. It was called My Blue Marble, and I was very thrilled about it. And actually, at that time, I didn't know that I wanted to be a writer. You have the green-eyed monster. So there was this friend of mine who used to come home and show all her poetry and her writing to my mother. And my mother said, oh, wow. So I said, okay, anything she can do, I can do better. And that is how I actually started writing. And bless that girl, because today I think I'm so fulfilled. I love writing. It's as though I'm meant to write. I don't think there is any monetary gain or anything. It's just that it gives me so much of pleasure. And I was an army brat. And across, where I spent a lot of time in the army, I got married to an army officer, carried on, became a lady wife, as they call it. And that is where I started writing, little articles about the army, about the Indian Army, and sent them to army magazines. And in the meantime, I was also writing short stories for Woman's Era and Mirror and Femina. And, in those days, you had those rejection slips. So you had to typewrite your manuscript and send it, and you had to send a little envelope with your return address. And I would dread those return addresses, because that meant that your story was coming back. So it was, that is how it went. And I carried on writing. And suddenly I said, okay, I got this brainwave. I said, I have so many army articles. Why don't I just put them together and make a book? So I sent my manuscript to Rupa Publishers in Delhi. And then I was thrilled when they accepted. The only thing they said is, you have to pad it up a little. You have to make it at least 250 words. So there I was, padding it up, adding on. And in 2002, Arms and the Woman came out. That was it is a light-hearted book, and it was written through the eyes of an army wife. That's my life in the army. So brought out all the hilarious aspects of the army and a few grave ones as well. And after that, I went on. I carried on writing. I wrote a lot of short stories and got into a lot of anthologies. And around 2014, in fact, before that, like I said, I used to have these little pieces of paper all over the house. So my mother, you know how mothers are. She used to collect all these little bits of paper. And one day on her birthday, she actually published a book of my poetry. That was what is called Deeparadhana, a takeoff on my name as well. And finally, in 2014, I wrote one of my first thriller short stories. It was called Mirror Image. And after that, I never looked back because I got in touch with Readomania and Dipankha Mukherjee, and their, stories just flowed. And 2020 was a very, very, I shouldn't be saying it, but it was a good year for me because despite the pandemic, I could sit at home and write, and I got out an anthology of short thriller stories. In 2014, I brought out my psychological novel, which is called Shadow in the Mirror. And that is how I'm working. I still have the Panchatantra out there, and I'm working on Shakespeare. So that is my journey in a nutshell.
Wow, it's amazing listening to you all. And Karen and Deepti, you have something in common. Both of you write about, thriller. Your focus, if I'm not mistaken, is thriller novels.
Yes.
So what? And I'm asking both of you this question. So, what is it that attracted you to this genre?
Are you going first, Karen?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So there's two reasons. For me, first of all, that's the genre I love to read. So I didn't even know actually at the time I was writing a psychological thriller until my agent told me. So I must have naturally picked it up from what I've read. And then the second reason was at the time of writing my book, I was pregnant with my second child and looking after a toddler. And I know, Sabin, you're a mother, but for me, it brought up a huge amount of emotion. And of course, emotions, really strong emotions, are fantastic tools to write. So I think I channeled all that energy into writing a psychological thriller book that was about, what you would do as a mother if something happened to your child. So I was sort of perfectly placed with all these hormones and emotions running around to write that book. So I'll probably say, it's the genre I like, and it was also a product of my circumstance at the time.
Deepti?
I think I can echo Karen when she says that is the genre I enjoy as well. I love thrillers. I love that little twist, the little thing that makes you go, ooh, in the dark. And, I love all those things. I would like, even when I read, those are the kind of books I read. And the more I get petrified, the more I enjoy the book. So my earlier short stories were, rather staid and prosaic, I think, when I look back, because it was only when I started writing my thriller short stories that I realized, oh, this is where I think my talent lies, wanting to scare people. In fact, people look at me and say, oh, you're a very sweet person, aren't you? I said, why do you ask? You write such terrible things in your novels about murder and things like that. I said, that's okay. That's all my imagination running riot, So Shadow in the Mirror was a psychological thriller, all right. And there was a little, I had a little germ of an idea that just worked out and turned it just psychological. I think the most interesting place to be is inside a person's brain. I don't think you can find a scarier place than that. So I think that is why I gravitated towards writing thriller, short stories, and psychological books.
So Lakshana, what genre attracts you the most?
As reading, well, I'm a very mushy cheeseball person, so I do love romance. I like romantic dramas and reading. I love fantasy. It's a very curious mix because I like gripping novels. I think I love reading crime. I used to love reading crime. Actually, I devoured and all Agatha Christie's and whenever I could. But I think over the years, I've somehow gravitated towards more likely, I like daily life. How do you spin gold out of daily life, out of daily events? I mean, the most mundane things, which happen to everyone, but how do you make that sound interesting? How do you make a story out of that? And that has been my challenge lately. That's the fiction I've been trying. Be it romantic fiction. And I think my idea is to actually delve into relationships between not just romantic relationships, but between siblings, between parents and children, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So, I mean, that is what I have been working on lately. I think that came from because I was influenced a lot by Chumpalari. I loved her, namesake and Unaccustomed Earth. I loved reading those books, and of course Anita Nair. So because that's where I got the idea of how to write about relationships, the idea of subtlety, nuanced, those very the complexities in relationships. How do you bring that out? And I've always admired authors who can, effortlessly talk about, difficult relationships without, hitting it on your head. Like, how do you bring it out without, being over dramatic and, screaming and drama and crying? So, you say the most when you don't say much. And that is what I have been trying lately. So yeah, of course, but fantasy will always be my first love.
So Karen, you spoke about your agent, identifying the genre, that speaks to you. So, and we're having a panel on editors as enablers as well. But my question is, how enabling are editors and agents, in this process, in this journey, in a writer's journey?
Well, I can only speak for the UK market in terms of agents and publishers, but agents in the UK are really gatekeepers. Actually, it's very unusual, certainly for fiction, to send your manuscript straight to the publisher. It really is the agent's job to sort of filter through and select what they think will sell. So in that respect, I would say to anybody watching and listening here that if you're interested in traditional publishing, then an agent is, I would say, probably the best way to go, the only way to go, actually. So my agent was critical in securing that deal for me. From an editing perspective, yes, he provided valuable input as well. And he's a fantastic man to brainstorm with, to tighten plots, to discuss, different characters and their motivations. So for me personally, he was a great support.
Sorry, I had to unmute. Deepti, your thoughts?
On agents?
How agents and editors, do you think they're enablers, they're gatekeepers? What is your perception? What is your opinion?
I don't know about agents because I don't have an agent, never tried. But editors, yes. I think that one thing that you must do is trust your editor. But there is something that she knows about the whole process, maybe more than you do. All of us are in love with our own writing. We could write reams and reams and reams and, think that it's the best prose or poetry going. But it is the editor who kind of holds on to you, stops your imagination running riot. And she says, hey, hang on, this doesn't work. When I was, writing Shadow in the Mirror, there were, two stories that had come together, and my editor told me, this bit doesn't work. And I almost sat and cried because I said, oh, but I want it to work. She says, sorry, that it doesn't work that way. You have to make the story work. So please trim all these bits. So there was a lot that I had to trim when the book actually came out. So, I mean, there was so much left over that I could actually write a sequel. So maybe that is what I do. But I deeply, deeply thank my editor and my publisher, because both of them got involved in what I was writing and they made my story shine. So I think editors are very, very important. They're not mere gatekeepers. They're the whole building. They're very, very, very important. And I think I've been very lucky with Readomania, because like I said, once I had my first story out there, I didn't look back, because I've been published by them very many times. So I'm very happy that editing and publishing has a huge place in my heart anyway.
So I read this article, and it's by the New York Times, and it was published in 2015. The Invisible Hand Behind Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird, which, by the way, is my go-to all-time favorite, book.
Yes.
So how much hand does an editor have? And because there's Harper Lee and all the writers, and you have to keep in mind the essence of a writer as well. So what do you say to that?
Still to me?
Yeah, and then we'll shift to Karen and Shana.
So what I do feel is that a writer has her own his or her own creative thoughts, and the editor tries as much as possible to let that be. The essence remains. It's only, I think, it's like when you trim away extra fat. That is what I think the editor does. So what the writer is still very much there. The book is still the writer's, but the garnishing and maybe the trimming is done by the editor. When you talk about To Kill a Mockingbird, unfortunately, Harper Lee's second book was not as compelling. To Set a Watchman was not as compelling as, and the sad part was she turned Atticus Finch around. So that killed me. Atticus Finch was, I mean, he was the god as far as all of us were concerned, but that turned things around,
And whenever I see Atticus Finch, I just think of Gregory Peck. So, it was.
Yes. So do I.
I think we all do.
Absolutely.
So, Karen, what do you, I'd like to ask you the same question.
Yeah, well, I think it's definitely like Deepti said, you have to have trust in your editor. And I was very lucky to have the same editor for all three books, probably because they came out one after the year, one each year. And I remember, in fact, I've got them here with my first one, because me and my agent had worked on it so much. The feedback from the editor was, mainly, I suppose, sub-edits and proofreading. There wasn't a huge amount. But the second one was much harder for me. This one is the home. And my editor came back with changes that were so big, it felt like I had to rewrite the book. And I think that is, as a writer, that can be quite discouraging. But that your editor wants that book to sell. So you're both aiming for the same goal. So however difficult the sort of, feedback is to accept, you have to understand that they know the market, they know what readers want, they know what's going to sell. So ultimately, I think that my editor was really helpful. And I think because of that, my third book actually didn't have as many edits, nowhere near as many edits as the second one, because I learned from her skill. I learned from, her way with words, her way with language, what she expected. She was an expert in her job. So I learned a huge amount during the whole editing process. And remember, in a publishing house, it's not just the editor, you then have the copy editors, the sub-editors. There's so many different pairs of eyes that go into that book to make it 100% for readers. And it's really the copy editors, the things that they pick up, just are mind-blowing. So that skill set is really critical, I think, in producing the best book possible.
Lakshana?
So yeah, just add to what Karen and Deepti said. I think editors and writers have a very symbiotic relationship. And because we as writers, to be very honest, we love our work, or rather we get very lost in our own thoughts and we just go for it. We write as much as we want, and I know, like certain words and sentences which sound great to us, but actually to another reader, it doesn't really fit there. So, and I think that's the job of the editor, and if a fantastic editor, then I have been lucky to work with some very good editors, brilliant editors who have managed to trim it and make it more fine and say, this works or this doesn't work, or keep this or elaborate more on this. So, and because like I think Karen said, they know what the market wants, what people want, So it's one thing I was always told in my writing workshops: kill your darling. Basically, we love our work, we love what we write, but you have to kill your darling at the end of it. If you like it, but it doesn't make sense, and maybe it can fit somewhere else.
Okay, so that brings me to another question. Your writing is, your creativity, your emotions, and on the other side, there's this. There's your readers. So you're writing for them, and you have to work not in a framework, but you have to keep these certain things in mind. So how do you navigate that? Lakshana, I'll start with you, then Deepti, and then Karen.
So you're not only, yes, you're writing for other people to read, and you're meant to communicate to your readers. I mean, but you're also at the same time, you're writing for yourself. It's your own catharsis. And but it's a bit of a tricky process, because what is appealing to you, what sounds so clear in your head and for you is clear on paper, the readers might not get it. Like I said, this is what the editors need to do, because the editor is another reader, a very critical reader, but the editor is there to read and to understand what exactly are you saying, how to communicate it better. So it is a bit of a minefield. It's a little difficult because it's not the easiest thing to do sometimes. And you might have to change sentences or, change the storylines or patterns, make things more clear, even though you don't want to. Because like I said, for you think you've got it. You can communicate. You understand it. Everybody else should. But unfortunately, that's not the case. So, yeah.
So like the editor is like the sounding board.
Yes, the editor is sounding board. Of course, there are things where, at the end of the day, it's also you wrote it. So you need to realize if you like something, there's a kind of a double-edged sword here. If you like something and the editor doesn't, you need to explain to the editor why you like it and why it should stay also. And that's where the editor will come out and help you understand how you can make it better, and that you can also have another pair of eyes is always welcome. But again, too many cooks, so limited. So,
yeah.
I think what Lakshana said is perfectly correct, because it's like a tightrope balance, very, very fine balance. You write for the readers, whereas I read somewhere that it's always readers first. But I think that's not completely correct, because it is also you first. In the sense that if you are not satisfied with what you're writing and you try and satisfy the readers, you're not going to get anywhere. So you have to be completely happy with what you have written, and then you put it out there. If the editor tells you, okay, this might not go, you explain it to him or her that, yes, I think this will go. If he convinces you, you'd make the change. If you convince him, you don't make the change. And finally, yes, we all are very careful, because we don't write things that ruffle readers' feathers. You're not, finally, you're writing for, it's like infotainment. It's not plain entertainment. You also want to inform the readers, but you cannot just say, no, it's all for the readers, because then you might compromise on your own writing. So I believe very firmly that what I write is sacrosanct. I love what I write. And if I feel I'm convinced, if I can convince my editor, I stick to it. So many a times we've had, discussions, and she said, so why don't we just write it this way? And I said, no, because it will not sound the same. This is what I wanted to say. Because if you write it that way, it's got a totally different meaning. So it's like a very fine balance. You can fall this way or that way. And if you fall into the grasp of the readers who don't like what you write, then you get those 1-pointer reviews and 2-pointer reviews. And then, you have the good, bad, the ugly reviews coming up. So but then you say, okay, finally, it's all worth it, because if you have more good reviews than not, then you're fine with it.
Karen?
Yeah, I think there's many factors involved in this. So I think as a writer, your first book that you write is for you. Because if you're not yet, most authors are not yet published when they write their first book, right? So they're purely writing for themselves in the hope to get published. I don't think really the reader is in their mind. The exception could be, I think, is if you're writing a very specific genre. So if you're writing, a crime thriller, readers are going to expect the crime or the murder or whatever. So in that way, you have to fulfill writers' expectations. When it changes is when you start writing, is when you do a book deal and you start writing on your second book and your third book. And that's when you start to build up your brand as an author. So I've written 3 psychological thrillers. All 3 have very strong themes of motherhood. If I was to go off and write, I don't know, fantasy, my current readers would be, where's the psychological thriller? So I think it is a delicate balance, but ultimately, as the author, and it can take anywhere from 6 months onwards, sometimes years to write a book. So you have to, write for yourself, for the majority of the time, I would say. Certainly the essence, as Deepti said a little bit more succinctly earlier, I think the essence must be there, that you enjoy writing that type of story for yourself.
Okay, so because I really want to ask that question, but very quickly, Karen, you have an agent. Deepti, you don't have an agent. Lakshana, I'm not sure if you have one or not.
Not yet, no, but I'm still.
Okay, so we've got, this diverse set. So I want to know, having an agent, how important is that? Lakshana, you go first. Do you think that?
Well, sorry, pardon?
Yeah, go on.
I think it is. I think it is very important also, because as a new writer, or rather, you're still in the market, so you do need an agent to take you forward into the publishing world, because at this stage, you going across to editors at this point or publishing houses, it is quite a difficult job. So yes, I think it is very crucial to have an agent at this point.
Deepti?
In the beginning. Yes.
I think I agree with Lakshana. It's important to have an agent, but if you don't have one and you're getting published, I think you're halfway there. And tomorrow, if an agent comes and holds out a hand to me, I'd gladly take the hand.
Karen?
Yeah, for me, it's been critical. Like I said, life-changing. And I think probably different markets work in different ways, but in the UK market, traditional publishing, which brings a lot of benefits in terms of marketing, editorial support, all of that, then an agent is critical. But, if you're an aspiring author watching or listening to this, there's so many other options, such as self-publishing right now as well. And many non-fiction publishing houses actually take direct book proposals. So it's not an absolute must. If you dream of becoming an author, do look at other options, because, there's nothing like seeing your work in print. And I think at the end of the day, that's the most important thing of all.
Wow. Thank you so much, Lakshana, Deepti, and Karen. It was wonderful chatting with you all. I wish we had more time, but unfortunately, this conversation must continue digitally through our different platforms. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you
here.
so much.
Thank
It's
you.
been wonderful being here, and I'm glad I've made two new friends. Lakshana is already a friend. I'm glad I've made two more friends.
Thank you so much, Deepti. Take care.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.